There's a general perspective in the Arknights community that I'm rather uncomfortable with, and I'll attempt to discuss it in this video. Note that this is all my personal opinion based on my experiences of helping out in various Arknights communities, so it may not be 100% accurate. Waifu over meta is a common phrase echoed about in most Arknights communities, and fundamentally I agree. The issue arises when newer players are taught that meta means absolutely nothing, and they should play the game with units they find enjoyable, which although true, overall takes away from their experience more than anything. Let's face it, a substantial portion of AK players aren't fantastic at the game. Look at the 200,000 views on Keel's TR15 video or CC4 statistics. Hell, even check any sizable Arknights streamer and you'll see handhold requests from developed accounts at that. The point I'm trying to make is that even with high rarity units, along with some meta units that they might have gotten even if they are a pure waifu player, a large portion of the Arknights player base tends to struggle at more difficult stages, looking at examples of ODEX8 or WDEX8. Now let's take a step back and look at how the phrase meta doesn't matter since the entire game can be cleared with 4 stars and below can be incredibly damaging for a new player's experience. Arknights is a fucking strategy game, and the general consensus is that it's completely acceptable to destroy that aspect entirely by copying one-to-one guides, and objectively it takes more away from the game than abusing meta operators. Keep in mind that again, beating the game with 4 stars is still an incredibly difficult feat, and not many players can achieve such. Involving hours upon hours paired with built-up game knowledge, you can go on and on about how Surtr and Thorns breaks the game or makes it too easy. But at the crux of the matter, stages still have a good amount of depth with these two operators, and if I had to pick whether to formulate potentially suboptimal strategies that rely heavily on rarity abuse or to one-to-one copy a guide, the former is substantially more appealing gameplay-wise, and I'm sure many will agree. Now before my next point, I'd like to clarify that I mean no hate towards anyone, and I'm merely trying to emphasize what I mean. Quoting a comment made by Kukkikaze, another Arknights creator that's substantially bigger than I am, it reads, "This is the mentality I don't want players to grow, just Surtr it, Lamau. The moment your mind gets accustomed to every stage, get starved to Surtr. You've already lost the treasure of the game, where it allows you to be creative and come up with tons of unique ways to face stages. I'm not saying I hate meta if that's what you imply. I want players to learn to play the game well, is the bigger thing I go for." While I completely agree with that statement, it fails to address 2 major points. A. Surtr by no means makes stages in the game trivial for the average Arknights. Thorns or Silverash would do that to a much greater extent. And B. His channel quite literally has a series about making the game as brain-dead as possible, with broken operators titled No Brain Guides, which goes entirely against the ethos of the above statement, with the treasure of the game where it allows you to be creative and come up with tons of unique ways to face stages. I'd much rather a shitty Surtr strategy that I created myself, as opposed to copy a low rarity strategy that although optimized to the fucking brim, does nothing for the player's experience except tie them to an endless cycle of never actually playing the game despite spending hours on it. Handholding is an aspect of the game that I personally feel is overly normalized, and it shouldn't be the case, incentivizing laziness and guide copying that makes a mockery of Arknights' beautiful gameplay. This is all an extremely pragmatic viewpoint, and I'm projecting my personal assumptions of the Arknights community onto my opinion, but from looking at help or comment sections of various Arknights communities, I feel that this for the most part holds true, especially when actual Dalao players rarely interact or watch mainstream Arknights content in the first place. My sincere apologies if I may be a bit long-winded, but my general point just boils down to meta mattering more for the average player than how generally Arknights communities perceive it. Thanks for watching.